Good afternoon, everybody who's joined. If you can please make sure you're all on mute and cameras off, that would be appreciated. Um, are we recording? Yes, we are recording. Thank you very much. Good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to the latest installation of the BCS Publishing Author Webinar Series 2025. I'm Ian Borthwick, Head of Publishing at BCS, and I'm joined today by Rachel Drinkwater, who's author of The Next Step, which is a career skill guide for BAs looking to take the next step in their careers. The work itself is published as a BCS Library exclusive, which means that it is placed on the BCS Library, which is a subscription library available to BCS members and to corporates and training providers looking to get access for their staff and their students. The library exclusive itself, the next step, covers all the essential skills that you need to look at when you're developing your BA career, practical tips, how you can use self-coaching techniques to develop yourself, and also use BA techniques within your own workplace and for your next steps in your career journey. So we will be holding questions at the end of the presentation. And if there's any other questions about BCS publishing, we're very happy to accept them. Please visit the BCS bookshop on shop.bcs.org. You'll find links to be able to contact us. For now, I will be handing over to Rachel Drinkwater, who's available here, and she'll run through her presentation, and we'll have, as I discussed, questions at the end, and I'll help to field those on your behalf. So we'll keep everybody on mute, but please do ask questions along the way, and I'll field them when we get to the end. Anyway, over to you, Rachel.
Magic. Thank you very much, Ian. Just wanting to check, can you see me superimposed over the slides at the moment? Is that actually working?
That is working.
Amazing. It's like the future or the past. It's kind of a retro futuristic thing. I found it yesterday. I love it. Gonna give it a shot. Hi guys. Hi. I'm Rachel Drinkwater. As Ian said, I'm here as one of the BCS authors. So for the author webinar series, I'm going to be talking to you about my book that was published last year, The Next Step, a practical guide to your business analysis career. So before I start talking about my book, I'm going to talk about myself, a bit of a specialist subject. So I'm Rachel Drinkwater, as I said. I'm a senior business analyst. I'm also a lecturer, a writer, a blogger, an actor, and a comedian. I was also the BA of the Year finalist last year. Lost out to Kay Hardy, which was a wonderful loss, to be honest, because she is quite an incredible person. Those out on my socials, do get in touch, follow me on LinkedIn, drop me a line if you want to discuss anything I've talked about today or about comedy or anything really that falls into my specialisms. And if you needed more evidence of my comedic acting, there it is. I don't know what to say about that moustache. It was incredibly itchy, but I do occasionally miss it. So about my book, so the book is a practical guidebook. It's supposed to be a companion to guide BAs through the next step of their career. So it's people who are contemplating a move, navigating that next step. There's a lot of self-coaching techniques in there, a lot of it around overcoming self-doubt and sort of taking control of the process of the recruitment process and the applications process. There's a lot of practical exercises in there. Some you may recognize from the world of business analysis. So things that we would do to analyze a business, turning them on their head and analyzing ourselves. And each chapter has a useful checklist. So just ensuring you've sort of ticked off all of those things you might want to think about at each step of the career, of the process or of the journey. There's also a lot of hard-won advice in there, both from myself, but also from a lot of BA leaders. So I've sort of went out to quite a lot of the community, gathered sort of their insights from a recruiter's perspective. So they're sort of scattered around in the book as well. As Ian said, it's an exclusive to the BCS, so it's sitting in the BCS library as an ebook. If you've got a BCS membership, you should be able to access that. So this slide, I just wanted to talk a little bit about how this all came about. So I was in a Women in IT sort of leadership session, and we were talking about things like leadership styles and also sort of job applications and job application process and so on and so forth. And I mentioned, well, asking about a potential future manager's leadership style might be a good interview question. And there was an audible gasp throughout the room. Um, I was sort of like, what? And somebody was like, well, I think you'd throw the job. You wouldn't stand a chance of getting the job if you asked a question like that. And I sort of probed a little bit more deeply, and it transpired that so many people in that room didn't feel comfortable with asking questions in interviews. They felt that the application process was very one-sided. It was really, you sort of go along, you try not to make a bad impression, you try not to jeopardize getting the job, say what you think they want to hear, and then if you get a job offer, then you should take it. So I really wanted to challenge that. I wanted to empower people. I wanted people to think that and feel that the job application process and navigating that journey from right at the beginning where you sort of go, I think I'm ready for the next step, or this isn't working out, I need something else, all the way through to being offered the job. I wanted them to feel control and empowerment and to know that it was a two-way street. So my whole book is written from that perspective of trying to put the job applicant, the person seeking that next step, in control of the process and in control of their career by default. So what's in the book? Chapter 1. Spoken about this a little bit, deciding to make a move, overcoming self-doubt, and deciding what you want to do. Sometimes we get to a point of our career where really the next step just feels like doing the same thing, or it's sort of on rails how we're going to progress. So I think it's really useful to take a check-in on that. It's like, do I actually want to take the natural next step? Do I want to do something different? What works for me? So that's the first chapter, and that's what we're really going to be looking at today. Chapter 2, finding opportunities. We're not going to look at this today, but in the book, there's a lot about things like networking, about getting involved in the community, in the BA community, job sites, I've said networking, but I'm going to say it again because it's so important. Networking, lots about that in chapter 2. Chapter 3, applying for opportunities. So mostly a checklist, this one, but thinking about your CV, your application letter, portfolios, different ways of applying for jobs. So that's chapter 3. 4, acing the interview. Loads of stuff here about presentation skills, storytelling, which we are going to touch on a little bit today. But that's quite a big chapter on some really, maybe some off the wall approaches to doing the application and the interview process, and then awaiting the offer and making a decision. So going back to that empowerment, it might not be the right opportunity. You might get the job offer, and it's easy to feel kind of compelled to accept if somebody's offering you a job. So it's helping you to sort of go all the way back to the things we're going to look at today from chapter 1 and appraise an offer against those things that you've identified your requirements for your next step. And also not being afraid to go back and ask more questions. Asking questions is so important in this whole process. There's also a lot of handy checklists, as I said, at the end of each stage of the journey. So you can print those out, or the PDF, you can sort of mark them off, just helping you sort of keep track of where you are and what things you might want to think about doing. And as I've said, some good advice from business analysis managers and leaders as well. So getting their perspective. It's all in there. We've also got exercises. So as I mentioned, a lot of stuff that you might recognize from your work as a business analyst. Self-SWOT, for example, so taking that business SWOT and turning it on its head and analyzing ourselves. But lots of the stuff there is using analysis techniques and tools on ourselves. So as I said, today's session, we're mostly looking at chapter 1. That's deciding to make a move, overcoming self-doubt, and deciding what you want to do next. And a little quote from the book there that whatever the motivation for you moving on, choosing to leave your current role is not easy. There's so much to consider, and there's quite a lot of social stigma as well. Hopefully not so much more today, but I think when I first started my career, sort of pressure from society and from family members was you get a job and you stay there for life. It's a different world now, and that's, even if you wanted to, probably not entirely practical. But these are just some of the things that kind of get caught up in this early stage of the process. So it's a decision that can come with a lot of soul searching, self-doubt, questioning whether it's the right thing to do. Hoping to unpick a bit of that in the book and in today's session. So we're going to sort of have a little think about some of those thoughts and those mindsets that sort of may hinder us in making that first step. We're going to look at the self-SWOT. So one of the models that's in the book, strengths, I'm going to call them would like to develop, because weaknesses feels a little bit brutal, especially when you're thinking about yourself. So things you would like to develop, or maybe things you would like to avoid, opportunities and threats. And then going to have a quick look at goals, goal setting. And then on to what's important. So your values, your requirements. I think we miss this sometimes, that holistic view of, well, it's not just about the job, but what about my life? What about that work-life balance? What's important to me as a person, completely detached from my job? Because we spend a lot of time at work, and I think we're seeing more and more blurring of personal life and work life. So we've got to make sure the two match and meet and complement one another and have that symbiotic relationship. And then, as I mentioned, we're going to go on as well and have a little look at storytelling as well. So what is getting in the way of you making your next move? So something I want to talk a little bit about is negative self-talk and imposter syndrome. A lot of people find a challenge with this, especially if you've been in an organization for a long time, if you've been in a challenging environment and you're feeling a bit run down and stressed, if it's a toxic working environment, possibly your self-esteem may have been undermined. It can make this really difficult. It can really cause a blocker and lead to people feeling a little bit trapped, because you kind of want to move on, you want to do something else, but also that sort of negative self-talk's keeping you paralyzed. It's estimated that 70% of individuals will suffer from imposter syndrome, according to a source that I've managed to not put a reference to in my notes here. But there was a source online. 70% of individuals will suffer from imposter syndrome. That's huge. And I think sometimes we think we're the only ones. So I'm the only person self-doubting, but 70% of people have this self-doubt in their mind. It's defined in the Oxford Dictionary as the persistent inability to believe that one's success is deserved or has been legitimately achieved as a result of one's own efforts or skills. So it's almost putting down your own achievements. It's not believing that the success you've created is something you've created for yourself. And that's really, really sad. It's really sad if you've worked so hard and you've achieved so much and it's still not enough for you. So that's imposter syndrome. And that can lead to all sorts of horrible things, symptoms of anxiety, perfectionism, just constantly striving to be a little bit better than you already are. Decision paralysis, that little loop we were talking about. You could go and do more things, but you've got this doubt niggling away in your head. Procrastination, trying to put off doing something because there's that fear that you're just not good enough. And it's often coupled with the inner critic. And I've got a little picture of a record there, and it's a broken record. It's that little voice in your head. It's a negative voice. It's highlighting insecurities, those perceived shortcomings. Now, none of this is going to be helpful when you're needing to take action, seek new opportunities, promote yourself in an application process, be your own champion. I'm not an expert. I'm not a counselor. I'm not a trained therapist. Negative self-talk can be exhausting. It can be constraining. It can be damaging, and it can really prevent people from, achieving what they want to achieve. And it can lead to people feeling very, very, anxious. In severe cases, it can make people depressed. It can lead to people being overwhelmed and stuck. It's not a nice place to be. So as I've said, I'm not a specialist. It's not the subject of my book. It's not the subject of today's session. So as a quick aside, there are techniques that can be used to reframe critical thoughts. There's things like putting them on trial to prevent or manage those behaviours. If it's something you do really suffer with, I'd encourage you to see what resources there are online. CBD, it's really useful. It's CBT, cognitive behavioral therapy. It's a type of counselling. It's really helpful for this sort of thing. The mind, mental health support, coaching, just bouncing it off a coach or a mentor. And then a lot of employers will also have ERP services. So there's so much out there. If people are feeling a bit stuck, it's really worth exploring some of these avenues and what can help. But as I said, it's not what we're going to talk about today. I just wanted to let people know they weren't alone if they're feeling like that. And there are ways to start overcoming some of that negative chatter. So What is getting in the way of you making your next move? You might recognize some of these. So we've talked about negative self-talk and imposter syndrome. That can lead to low self-esteem. Maybe you've perceived you've got a lack of experience. You're not sure if you're ready to take that next step. Uncertainty about the market. Depending on who you're following on LinkedIn, I'm sort of hearing the market's brilliant and is exploding at the moment, and some people are just going, oh, the market's awful. Depends what industry you're in, I think. So there might be that uncertainty, decision paralysis. Should I go? Should I stay? Getting images of Brad Pitt playing snooker or pool in the 90s and showing my age to should I stay or should I go? Sorry, digressing. Lack of confidence in your skill set. Too much competition out there, or feeling like you're not competitive enough, or just not feeling ready. Again, none of this is going to help you to move on. It's sort of stuff we need to overcome before we start moving on to that next step and taking that first step on the journey. So the book, lots of practical advice that may help you manage some of these thoughts. Just some things that have helped me over the years, ways of reframing some of this, or finding out that information to get rid of the what if, understanding my experience stacked up against the market, understanding the market. So we're going to look at a couple of those exercises that can get you moving on your journey. The more I look at this picture, the more I am concerned about this guy's security with the key there and his wallet in his back pocket. The photo is starting to disturb me, but it's supposed to represent the first step of the journey. Just try and keep your stuff a little safer. So, first technique, skills mapping to overcome self-doubt. So if you're doubting whether your skills are aligned to the market or you've got what it takes to take that next step, do some research. Research the skills and qualifications for the job you're aspiring to, in the industries you're interested in. Grab a job spec. Start mapping what your skills and experiences are against those job specs. Similarly, role definitions on professional sites. The BCS have got job specifications for each stage of the BA career, and all like many of the jobs in the IT industry as well. The IIBA as well. If you are looking at business analysis, that's a really good source of information about what the BA role needs. So check your skills and experiences against each of these. And we'll come back to this a little later because this can be a really good foundation for when you start to develop stories for that application process, but we will come to that in a moment. So firstly, do your skills and experiences align? If it's yes, brilliant. You can tell the inner critic to shut up. It's got no ammunition. It's clearly you have got evidence that you meet all of those criteria. If your skills and experiences don't quite match up, and chances are you will have a lot more matches than you think you will, that's good too, because there's loads of areas now you can focus on to prepare for your next step. You know what the gaps are, you know what you need to do to overcome that gap and put yourself in a really strong position. So either way, it's a good outcome because when you get to the point of applying and making that first step, you're equipped either way. And we'll talk a little bit about, actually, no, we don't talk about action plans today. We're going to talk there's action planning in the book. So these things can go into your action plan of how you're going to move forwards. I want to caveat this as well, that you don't need to tick every box to apply. There's a very well-known statistic, which I don't have to hand, but there are certain demographics, certain groups of people who are much less likely to apply for a job if they don't tick every single box. So please don't feel that you have to tick every box and have evidence of everything. Also, you can get a little creative. So let's take process mapping off here, for example. There are probably examples where you have done process mapping, you've just not done it in a formal setting, or you've not called it that. So try and think a little creatively about how you can demonstrate that you've ticked some of these boxes, that you've done some of these things. Quite often we downplay some of the things we've done because we haven't got a formal title around them, or we haven't formally called them something in an exercise. You can probably evidence everything on a job spec if you're looking for that next step. So the SWOT model, this is the next exercise. So using SWOT, the SWOT model is usually used to understand an organization's competitive position, to inform its potential strategic direction by analyzing its strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats. So we adapt it and we understand ourselves, our own competitive position, our own strategic opportunities. Um, so you can create a blank SWOT matrix. Strengths, as I've said, would like to develop rather than weaknesses, opportunities and threats. The other thing with would like to develop, it might be would like to avoid. That's okay. So this is an example of sort of a little bit blurry, so apologize for that. That's one I've just pulled from the book. So we have here, as you can see, a populated one. There's a sort of my persona that I've used. It's not a real person, it's just a persona I've created. But I talked there about would like to avoid. We've got someone here who dislikes maths and accounting. So they're probably not going to want to start applying for jobs as an accountant. It's okay to avoid things that don't bring you joy, that don't set your soul on fire, that aren't things that you actually like to do. Um, at the same time, you're probably going to need some maths and accounting. So it's sort of striking that balance between how much of it you want in a role. So we've got their opportunities and threats. Quite often these tend to be external things. So what's going on out in the market? What sort of things could you do around training, qualifications, start building your skill set to demonstrate that passion for business analysis? And threats are often things, industry things, macro environmental things, whereas strengths and would like to develop are normally an internal thing. So how does it help? Well, it helps you think about your strengths. And that's brilliant, again, for managing that inner critic, for really focusing on what it is you're brilliant at and you do really well. It helps you to identify areas you'd like to develop. So, again, putting into that action plan, what can I be doing to increase my competitiveness, to increase my options in the market? And also, it's nice to sort of make peace a little bit sometimes with those things you'd like to avoid, accepting that you just don't like doing something, or even you're not great at it. We can't be brilliant at everything. I suck at snowboarding. I avoid snowboarding. I've made my peace with that. So it's okay. It's nice to make your peace with things you want to avoid, and then make a plan. How are you going to do the things you do want to develop? Considering opportunities and threats, which can help you think outside the box. Explore different approaches. Can you turn any of those threats into opportunities? And are any of those opportunities potentially threats, or are those opportunities potentially strengths? So it's sort of really helping you to sort of think about your current state, think about those influences externally that might be impacting you. And then, again, I've said we're going to talk about story in a little while. Start to build a story narrative around your strengths, because they're going to come in really, really useful when you start getting to the application part of the process. So understanding what's important to guide your path, goal setting. You may not have a goal. And if you don't, that is absolutely fine. I don't think that many people actually do have a goal. And certainly long-term goals are really difficult. We live in a VUCA world, which is, and now I've forgotten what the acronym stands for, uncertain, complex, ambiguous, and I'm trying to remember what V stands, volatile. There you go, volatile, uncertain, complex, and ambiguous. That describes our world. The rate of change is faster than it's ever been. That sort of change in markets, change in technologies. There are jobs that exist today that didn't exist 5 years ago. There are technologies today that didn't exist 2 years ago. It's incredible what we're doing. So trying to make a 5-year plan in a world that's changing so quickly, I think is a thing of the past. But we can have goals. We can know where we want to go in our career. We can have an idea. Do we want to move into, if you're a junior BA, do you want to move into business analysis, into senior business analysis, into team lead? Do you want to pivot off maybe into enterprise architecture or project management? Or do you want to take a different path altogether? Having an idea of what your goals might be can really help. But it's not essential. I know a lot of people that are very successful that just kind of go with the serendipity approach. If something floats past that looks interesting, they'll hop on and give it a try. That's perfectly legitimate as well. But if you do have goals, it's helpful. If you don't, the next exercise might help you start to just formulate some thinking, if not about goals, but what your requirements might be, what's important to you. So this is the what's important matrix, very quirky name. So it's important to think about what's important in your life. That's huge. Your life is really important, right? It's what you do when you're not at work, and hopefully there's a good balance of the two. So what's important to you overall? Then what's important in your next job role, in an organization you're working for, and in the package, because most of us work because we need the money, right? And the package that sits around that's why we're employed. It's also useful to understand what's unimportant, what's unwanted, what things you really do want to avoid in an organization. So again, this is lifted directly from the book, so it's a tiny bit blurry, so I do apologize there. But as you can see here, the persona, the individual that I've sort of the created this for, things that are important: time with their family and friends, time and energy to go climbing and running, to be respected at work, a meaningful job that makes a difference. Their next job role, kind of starting to align those things. So what's important to them is professional development, so opportunities to develop and progress. So using what's important in life to inform the next job role. And then organization. So there's things there about commute, again, tying in with those personal sort of drivers, and the things that are important around package as well. So we've sort of identified, I think, in what they like to do, going climbing and running. So a gym membership, super useful, super important to them. Whatever works for you is right. And I think this is an exercise that's worth doing really truthfully and being really honest to yourself. I think if I'd been asked to do this when I was 20, I'd have probably put in there the things that I thought people would want me to put. I certainly wouldn't have been saying I wanted spare time in my life to spend with my family and friends, or spare time in my life to go to the gym. I'd probably been saying I want to power up the ranks and be a high-flying corporate flyer. I wouldn't have thought about work-life balance because that wouldn't have been what I thought people wanted to hear. So I think this is really important to do this for you, and then recognize that whatever you put in those boxes is true for you, and it's right, and that's okay, and that's what your view of what the perfect job will look like, not what society's view of the perfect job will look like. We're all on different journeys. We all have different things that are important. And I think the world is starting to recognize that work is something that has to sort of coexist with your personal life as well, and I think that's wonderful. But there's still some legacy attitudes about that, and sort of again that negative critic thoughts, that negative critic voice may be telling us that we should be filling this in a little bit differently. So just something to reflect on there. And then at the bottom there, things that are unimportant and unwanted. So this person said they're not really fussed about a competitive or aggressive environment. They're not too interested in that power struggle, like sort of trying to fly up the ranks. They don't want the high pressure environment, and they're not too fussed about being a very high earner. They, their driver is very much a well-rounded sort of work-life balance, and that's really important to them. So yeah, a really useful exercise. I've done this a number of times when I've been sort of trying to work out what I do actually want, and it's actually really good as well. So you can prioritize these. So good old Moscow there: must have, should have, could have, would like. Just to establish, where might you be have a little bit of flex. So if a brilliant opportunity came in, but let's see, they don't have volunteering activities down here on the left-hand side. Down, where's my mousey gone? Down here, volunteering opportunities. Is that a showstopper? Is that something you could flex on a little bit? This is great, especially if you've got two offers, when you've sort of gone through the application process and you've gone through the interview process and you've got two offers on the table. Wonderful situation to be in. If you're anything like me, that suddenly introduces a whole load more stress and quite a difficult decision. So screening those back against these core values, these core things that you really, really want out of your life and out of your job role, can really help you with that decision. It can also help to shut down application processes if you're partway through and maybe you're starting to get a few red flags, maybe things don't seem like they're going to align with your values and what you need. Again, screening them back against this can be really helpful. And what we're trying to do here is really create a foundation for you to sort of embark on this journey, just feeling confident, feeling like you can move forward, and you're sort of equipped to do so. And you've answered some of those niggling what ifs that are causing you blockers. So making a plan. Oh, we do have making a plan in here. Brilliant. Have a think. What areas do you need to work on and or gain experience in? Are there any big gaps that would be really useful when it comes to application and interview for you to be able to demonstrate? And how can you do this? What can you put in place? What mechanisms are there? Can you get opportunities in your current role to start stretching, demonstrating new skill sets? Can you do it in a volunteering space as well, equally as valid? Who can I speak to for guidance and access opportunities? Networking. There's a huge chunk about networking in my book. It's so imperative. It's so important. Networking within your organization, networking externally, um, speaking to coaches, mentors, other people that have gone on that journey before you. And we are so lucky in the business analysis community. Because it is such a caring, opening, welcoming community full of people that just love sharing their experiences, sharing advice. So there are so many people you could reach out to, just ask advice about how do I go for that next step. Think about what the stories are that you want to tell about your career and your experiences so far. And as I said, we're going to step on 2 stories in just a second. So starting to frame some of those skills, some of those strengths, some of those things you came up with when you looked at that job spec. Think about those and what stories do I want to tell? What's that narrative I want to put across? And put yourself some goals as well. So when are you going to put these things into play? When do you want to make that next step and work backwards from there? So we are going to skip ahead. We are currently in chapter 1 of the book. We're going to zoom ahead to chapter 4. So let's say you've taken the first step. You've applied for a job, you've been offered an interview, and now you need to explain to the interviewers why you're the best candidate for the role. You've already done some of the work. You've mapped your skills and experiences against the job spec. You've screened the spec against your values and needs. You've sought opportunities to bridge any gaps. You just need to articulate it in an interview setting. Easy, right? Not right, no. At a recent networking event, a friend and a peer lamented to me that he had spent the last few weeks undertaking interviews with candidates who just rambled on and on and on in response to their interview questions, had no idea how to build a narrative. As I was one of those candidates, I tried to not look too offended, but he described these sort of long, unstructured, rambling answers. The problem is that interviews can be really scary. They're highly formal. You know you're under scrutiny. The odds are pretty. The stakes are pretty high. You know, you're sort of hopefully this is a job you really want, and that can cause a lot of stress. And you can be really blindsided by an unexpected question. Speaking from my experience, sometimes exacerbated by nerves, I start strong. I'm answering a question. I've got it all structured. I know what I'm going to do, and then I get lost. And 2 minutes have passed, and I'm still trying to explain how this project that I worked on for 5 years worked. I'm trying to clumsily provide context so the interviewer will understand how challenging it was, how big a project it was, the nuances, because that was a huge part of my life. But this level of detail isn't necessary. It's not what the interviewers are looking for, and it just gets us further and further away from answering the question. By the time I get near to answering the question, I've forgotten it. I've forgotten what I've talked about. I've sort of taken this meandering path, and the audience have disengaged, and I've just not actually. I've failed to provide the valuable part of the answer, which is what did I do? What was the result? That's what they're trying to get to. If they want more detail, the interviewers can ask for more detail. It's always better to sort of give them a nice structured version of the story and let them delve into it. So in my book, I explore storytelling and how it can be used to formulate these answers, to structure things. So there's a couple of techniques. I'm going to show 2 of them today. STAR technique, you're probably more familiar with than the other one I'm going to go through. The STAR structure stands for situation, task, action, result. And it's used quite a lot in interview techniques. It's sort of one of the classic models that's recommended for structuring an interview question or interview answer. So for the situation, a brief and concise background, brief and concise, the note I have to keep reminding myself of, brief and concise background to the real life situation and the context. So this is a very brief version of why that 5-year project was being done, what the strategic implications of it was, and what your role was in that project. The task, what you individually needed to do, and the action, what you did. I've highlighted you because, especially for business analysts, it's really difficult sometimes to think about what you as an individual did. We often work in teams. we tend to be humble. We tend to celebrate what we've all done as a team together. So this is one time to step away from that and really celebrate what you individually contributed. And what was the outcome? So the result. So how did it end? What did you achieve? Did you achieve your goals? What did you learn from it? So that's the star structure. And then the second one is, so this is from Keith Johnston's Improv for Storytellers. So as I mentioned, I'm a comedian and I do improvised comedy. I'm part of an improvised comedy troupe. And this is a mechanism we use for creating, and I've just realized my animations are all over the place. Do apologize for those little baubles all over the place. It will make sense in a moment. This is a technique we use in improv. It's to create a narrative very quickly and to create an interesting story in a very short period of time. So humans are innately wired to listen to stories. A good narrative will hold attention, and a good structured narrative can bring an audience on the journey. It can help share your message. So here we've got platform, and as you can see, there you go, it's making sense now. Establish a foundation, a normal, the reality and world in which our story takes place. We have a tilt. Something happens, shifts the status quo, makes the story more exciting, because if we're just talking about context, that background, it's not very interesting. We need the tilt, and then something happened. And then a resolution. So the story resolves into a new state of normal. And as you can see there, those little baubles I mentioned link them into the star model. So very similarly, we have a situation, we have the task in action, then we have the results. So as you can see, a very similar format for the narrative, but this one's a little bit faster, it's a bit snappier, and it sort of follows that context, something exciting happens, result, and this is our new normal, so it goes round in a loop. There's a few more of these in the book, so Pixar Story Spine, I talk about that as well. That was really useful for the classic tell me about your CV. It's a much longer story, but it's keeping it succinct, it's keeping it a little bit sharper and using that narrative. So my advice would be go through the job spec, map examples from your experiences to each of the criteria, and then write them out as a story using any of the story structures, whichever works best. And you might want to chop and change depending on what your examples are. And then familiarize yourself with presenting them in a compelling and structured manner. Right, so that brings us to our recap. That is the end of the content. So today we have talked about addressing self-doubt through self-coaching exercises, addressing that inner critic, that imposter syndrome, some techniques to really factually and objectively look at your skills and where you are, your current state analysis. So using some of those exercises, thinking about goal setting and creating an action plan, understanding what's important to you, and turning your strengths and experiences into stories. So just recapping there, that's the book. It is on the BCS library. I think Ian and Lawrence will be sharing some links, a link to that just now, or have been already. Again, that's my information. I promise not to wear a moustache if we ever meet, and if I meet you for a chat. Get in touch with me on LinkedIn. That's my blog on the right-hand side there. So got some of my other writings on there as well. And I think we're going to move to questions. So yeah, please, I think you've been putting questions in the chats. I think Ian and Lawrence will be taking those questions now. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Rachel. Great presentation. And please do post any questions if you've got them in the chat. I do have a few. I'm very happy to get us kicked off with them. And basically, I'll start with my first one, which is, what would you say, Rachel, is one key skill that's helped you develop your career?
Yeah, I think it was something that I actually avoided for a very long time, which was networking. I think it's one of the most valuable things in creating opportunities, in gaining that sort of, I mentioned serendipity, and I think networking opens up serendipity, it opens up opportunities. I've had roles from people I've just met at a conference, and then somebody's contacted me on, do you fancy a bit of writing work, or do you fancy having a chat about potential opportunities with my organization? Similarly, I've met people at conferences, really got on well with them, and then followed up afterwards and sort of asked if they've got any opportunities. So I was quite fearful of networking, I think. And one of my other presentations is fear and loathing in conference networking because I really struggled with it for the longest time. And then I realized the value of it and sort of created a few sort of workarounds to sort of make it work for me. I'm a bit of an introvert, so
Hmm.
I struggle in those big social environments. So yeah, I sort of came up with some strategies that really work for me. But yeah, especially in the BA space, networking is probably that top skill to really work on.
Fantastic. No, I think networking is very valuable, and for any of the introverts in the crowd, I have spoken with other people who very much like to know, push themselves just for that day, and then make sure they've got that extra time off afterwards to re-energize themselves.
100%. Yes.
Yes, definitely, it's definitely worth it from that perspective. Right, next question I actually got was, what if you want to take sort of a backward step in your career, or if you need to take a career break for any reason?
Mm.
And the kind of the key barrier then, the question is, how do you overcome any kind of feeling of you being overqualified for a next role?
Yeah, I think honesty has to be the best policy. Um,
Mm,
so I think if I were in that situation, and again, sort of as I sort of alluded to, I think there can be a lot of negative doubt, negative self-talk about that. We're always sort of feeling like we should be striving and growing and progressing. And actually, sometimes a step back is exactly what's needed to do something that's a little less taxing, maybe a little bit less multifaceted, or maybe a step back is more towards what you enjoy. I think sometimes as we progress in our careers, we start to take on lots of leadership stuff and start to maybe get away from the stuff on the ground, which is the stuff we
mm,
really enjoy. So I guess firstly having the courage of your convictions that the reason I'm doing this is because it's right for me and that's fine, that's good, that's okay. Um, and then just being very open in communications with people about why you're taking that step back, and that you do want to take that step back, and that you appreciate that your qualifications are now in this higher space, um, but you are very committed to doing the role that maybe isn't quite as multifaceted or isn't as
mm.
stressful or whatever that motivation is. I would just say be honest.
Fantastic. That's a really good answer. Got actually a follow-up question to one we just talked about before this one, which is,
Mm.
what are the specific strategies you'd recommend for navigating social situations as an introvert?
Ooh, so part of me is like, you should watch my other conference talk. So I'll briefly. I think I had six. I had six factors, and I can't remember all of them off the top of my head. But I'm going to try. So one of them was to back channel, use digital channels. So in-person networking is brilliant, but when you go to a conference or something like that, there's often a lot of chatter going on the hashtags, and on their socials. So you can sort of dip in and out. You can maybe do a bit of work online, see if there's somebody that you find interesting that's talking about something interesting, and then try and find them in real life. It gives you a focus. It gives you one person to go and find, and or an established topic of conversation. So use that digital tool to help inform who you're going to talk to. That leads into my second one, which is find a friend. You don't have to network with everyone in the room. Find a few people that you really get on with, that you've got something in common with, or that you've seen some of their work, seen things that they've shared online, and you want to talk to them about it. Be authentic. Go on and just have a chat with someone. Um, Other things I came up with, this might scare you, do a talk. I love presenting. It's very easy for me to say. I know that's not everyone's bag, but if you can do a talk at a conference, because you're a speaker, you've kind of got half of the battle of going out and finding people to talk with. People will come and talk to you. You've got a ready-made subject, and you're putting yourself out there without having to sort of manage all those conversations, which certainly introverts can find quite draining. I cannot remember the other three of them. I'm pretty sure that one of my conference networking talks is available online, so I can share the link with Ian, who can. Would that be possible to share the link with you, Ian, and then you can sort of push it out to the group?
I'll have to double check, but I think what you could do is repost it on LinkedIn, and everyone look for Rachel on LinkedIn will probably be the easiest way of
Perfect.
popularizing that, if
That
that's
would.
okay. So if you don't mind sharing your LinkedIn profile, or I'll
Yes,
look it up when I've asked the next question and post it for you. How about that? The next
absolutely.
question is from Darpeet. He's a data analyst apprentice in his first year of career, and asking what's the best way to utilize the apprenticeship to enable us to smooth transition to a new company once the apprenticeship is over. So, with that kind of internal qualification that an apprenticeship provides, what recommendations might you give to a data analyst or business analyst in that kind of role?
Yeah, so I think it's probably that skills mapping. So just being aware of you've kind of got your internal flavor, I guess, of what the job looks like and those criteria and those skills you're gathering. Start to have an eye on the market, start to think what sort of skills and experience are being asked for in jobs outside of your organization, and then already start to do that skills mapping. So what can I do? What evidence do I have of meeting this criteria, and so on? Where are the gaps? What do I need to add on to my apprenticeship to complete to fill all those gaps and to sort of demonstrate that I can do all of these things? And you're in a really good position with an apprenticeship because you're documenting as you go along, sort of what skills you're developing, your experiences. So you've already got a really nice portfolio of all those brilliant things you've done, all those great strengths. So you can probably, as I was saying earlier, sometimes because something hasn't got a formal title against it, we think we haven't got evidence of it, but the chances are you have. So I would suggest going back over that paperwork and those logs of what you've been doing, map them over, start to really think about how you can evidence those jobs you want to go for.
Fantastic. I think that's really useful. I think some of the documentation elements here, as you said, the documentation and storytelling are becoming very, very clear recommendation from all of this. I've got a couple of questions here. I think we can probably take just two or three more questions. Let me have a little quick look at this. I was just doing something else at the time. Sometimes we need a leg up from a potential new contact. Is there a best way of asking for help or approaching people um, when they what's this when people might yeah, particularly if you don't like asking for help yourself. So how
Mm,
would you go about asking for help if you're I mean, and this is kind of a question I had, it's like when you're feeling stuck, how best way of getting unstuck. So particularly reaching out and asking for help. And I think it's particularly difficult if you have imposter syndrome in the first place, that you don't feel like you've earned where you are.
yeah.
So why would you ask for help even? So
Yeah, absolutely. And it can be one of those sort of little spirals you get caught in. It's like, and I don't feel I'm good enough to be going for these jobs, so I feel like a little bit like impostery, even asking if I can progress up. But I don't think anyone's ever going to think that. I think if somebody that only had a year's experience came to me and said, I want to lead a BA practice, I'd be like, amazing, love your enthusiasm. Let's put a plan in place. Let's work out
mm,
what steps you need to go through. And I think you will find that, especially in the business analysis space, people are so welcoming, so open to providing guidance, providing their experiences. So I would say join one of the professional bodies, follow people on things like LinkedIn. There's loads of big players in the space who just share knowledge all the time.
mm,
Do lots of conference talks. If you can get to any of the big conferences, they're not cheap, but they are really worth going to. I know the BCS run regular webinars and workshops and things like that. So just get yourself out there, find some people you trust, start building up that rapport, networking again. I'm sounding like that broken record, but build up your network and then start talking to the people you trust, and they will help you on their journey. They will not judge. They will not tell you, well, if they do tell you you're not ready, then they're not a trusted friend and you possibly should back away from them. Surround
mm.
yourself with people that believe in you and trust you, and will give you that leg up.
Thank you very much. So the next question, it's kind of an interesting question about career changing. Um, and it reminds me, I do, and it's a little plug. We're actually in the middle of, or the second day of Chartered Week, which is a new celebration of chartership across many different bodies, including BCS, project managers, and lots of other people. Do check online, and you'll see some of this being promoted through BCS as well as other institutes. And chartership is obviously a registration which couples with qualifications to help people assert and demonstrate their technical skills, their ethical nature, and how they are professional. I think the question for this is like, so I'm sort of feeding the idea of chartership into this question, but for career changing in business analysis, and particularly changing domains, it does seem to be quite hard. I mean, I think the question may be about a new domain of application of being a business analyst. But when it comes to either changing the way, the area of the industry you do business analysis in, or perhaps
Mm.
changing role using business analysis skills, are there any particular aspects that you would recommend people follow or look at?
Yeah, I'm going to answer this in a couple of ways because yeah, I think the question is quite multifaceted. So I think if you're talking about changing industry domains, I think it's demonstrating in your application process, demonstrating when you're networking with people, those core BA skills. So it shouldn't really matter which domain you're in, um, or you come from. So if you've got, for example, I've got a lot of higher education experience. So coming from higher education, I would still expect to be able to go and work in retail or utilities or any other domain because I've got core business analysis skills. Now, I know in reality that's not always the case. A lot of job specs will say specifically looking for XYZ experience. Um, but it is worth a shot because again, you don't have to tick every box on an application form. If you can demonstrate that you are a fantastic BA at the core, it shouldn't matter what domain you've come from. In fact, having fresh eyes and coming from a different domain can be a real advantage. So again, it's being able to sell yourself, it's being able to demonstrate your your abilities and your experiences in a way that's compelling. And again, as Ian said, that chartership will help do that. The qualifications as well, the BCS qualifications, the ISEB qualifications, underpin that. Yeah, it's almost a guarantee that you've got those BA abilities. You've done those qualifications. You understand business analysis. You are at core a business analyst. If you're talking about leaving BA and switching into a different career track, yeah, it's tricky. It's not impossible. I've done it a couple of times. I think partially just to prove I could.
Hmm.
Um, but I sort of took a little segue into the world of marketing, and the world of marketing is scary. I came back.
Yes.
um, but yeah, I think it's quite similar. Understand what's needed. Find out, get some job specs of things you're interested in doing. Find out what they're looking for. Then think about your experiences and how they map across. Something I did when I was sort of segueing over into marketing was I took a couple of marketing courses. I started writing some blogs on some marketing subject matter, and I started going to marketing events and I started networking there and talking about the things that I was really interested in the marketing space. And eventually I got an offer. Well, quite quickly actually I got an offer from a friend who I'd met at a conference, and they were like, oh, I need somebody to come and do my content. I really like the look of your blogs. Do you want to come and be my content manager?
Hmm.
So again, it's serendipity. And I'm, again, sounding like a broken record, networking, 100% networking.
Fantastic. I mean, I was just putting in if there is a follow-up author webinar with Christine Lovelock, who is a business analyst by training, but she's also reviewed the range of different careers within tech that may be useful to people either coming into tech or looking at changing careers once they've started in tech. Myself, in my career, I started as a data manager, if you can imagine that. And I would say that the skills never leave you, but you're never quite able to use them all the time. And I think the most common, why it's good to network and understand how people work. It's when you get into organizations where it's always been done like this and say, yes, and yes, here we are. And now we have to look at it differently. And I think that's where the business analyst skills, the playbook that BAs can bring is really powerful in terms of helping to review what's happening, review what the potential target model should be that people may wish to work to, and helping plan the process of getting there. Um, I don't think we've got any other sorry, not skills, questions. We have lots of other skills. We can always develop new skills. So just like to say thank you very much, Rachel, for covering quite a lot today. It's been actually really very detailed and really very informative. If anybody does want to find out more about BCS Library, please use the link I provided in the chat. The BCS subscription library is available to BCS members, to corporates, as well as training providers. It is a paid for item, but the BCS library exclusives are included within it. And we're very happy to discuss requirements with individuals and companies as appropriate. Just please do get in touch. Once again, thank you, Rachel. Thank you, everybody, for attending. I look forward to seeing you on an author webinar series in the future. We have lots coming. It's all booked up all the way. It's about the end of June at the moment, and we'll have lots of new topics that may be of interest to business analysts as well as others in this space. So again, once again, thank you very much. We'll post a recording when we can, and we look forward to seeing you in the future.
Thank you, everybody.